And I'm going to introduce Lance, who's going to give us a rundown on the session, legislative session. We hired Lance during the 2019 session. So he's worked for the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance now for about a year and 4 months. He has elevated our visibility at the Capitol greatly. He has helped us connect with legislators who we did not have relationships with before. And he also has great relationships with ITD and agencies, so he has been invaluable to our success. So Lance, do you want to go ahead and just talk about the session and some successes and challenges that we had? And then I hope that there's time for Q&A afterward. So Lance, take it away.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So what I'm going to talk about today is just kind of give an overview of the transportation legislation during the session, then kind of talk about some big picture issues during the session, and then just kind of talk about some next steps. So just in general with the session, I thought it was kind of a mixed bag. We had some really big successes, and I'll kind of start off with that first, and that was House Bill 614, which was signed into law, and that prohibited, in most circumstances, the use of cell phones while driving a motor vehicle. And this is something the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance has been working on for many years. And everything is one of those things that, you know, if you don't have a presence of the Capitol, you're not going to be able to jump on it. And we were there, and we were able to help. In this case, the leaders were United Insurance. We were able to work together with them and the legislators that moved this forward, and we were successful. So it was a really big deal getting that passed. And so Cynthia can probably jump in here a little bit just on what it means to the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance.
I'll just give a little bit of history. We worked several years ago on well, it's still the current law, which is texting while driving. And we considered that a huge success. I can't remember what year that was. If anybody remembers, jump in. I think it was 2014 or 2015. And that was a huge win for us at the time. But over time, it has not proved to be, as you all know, sufficient for safety on our roads. So this legislation that has gotten passed to us is enormous, and I hope to all of you, and I just want to say thanks to all of you who made phone calls and texted your legislators. That makes a huge difference. So thank you.
And I'd just like to add to that, just the emails and calls really did make a difference at all stages of the game on this legislation. We heard it from legislators, and we heard it from our partners in working on this legislation. The next kind of set of bills I wanted to talk about were, there was an effort to use, I guess, surplus in our general funds to fund transportation. And in the past, we've dabbled in that from time to time, and the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance has been able to benefit from that with children's pedestrian safety program funding and things like that. They tried doing something different this year. They tried to use create an endowment fund. They tried doing, and those were House Bills 309 and House Bills 513. And then there was a bill at the very, very end of the session, House Bill 623. But none of those bills included anything for standalone child crosswalks or sidewalk fill-ins. So we weren't super excited about those bills, and at the end of the day, we're kind of happy they didn't make it. There was also another bill that added, again, took money from the general fund, which we're not opposed to use funds for reducing congestion and fixing some bridges on our local roads. Again, this, I think with the economic times, this bill was vetoed by Governor Little, and he said, come back later when we're in better shape. So I would expect something, and I'll touch on that later on, kind of what's down the pike on future funding. We also followed closely. Let me look through my notes here. A couple of other things. There was a bill that made some changes to driver training requirements and reduce the hours. We weren't super excited about it. We wish, at the end of the day, we wish that the legislation would have conformed more with national requirements. And this is something we're going to look into, and maybe we'll take another crack at it in future years, working with our partners. There was also an interesting bill. It was House Bill 566, and that increased the weight of personal delivery devices, which is basically like robots that kind of deliver packages. We're not quite sure what the impact of that will be on the walking and biking community, and we're going to watch it closely. And if these are ever deployed in Idaho, we're definitely going to, kind of see, how is this affecting pedestrians and cyclists, and if there is a negative impact, we'll go work with the legislature to maybe make some changes on that. It's kind of a wait and see type of legislation. Let's see here. There was an interesting bill that Ken Konovnik over at ITD brought to our attention. That was Senate Bill 1313, and it didn't get a lot of attention, but what it was trying to do was to allow developers to, set up, kind of get almost a stamp of approval on whatever traffic studies or plans that they had for their neighborhoods. And we were, thanks to Ken, we were able to work with others to make sure this didn't move forward. But this bill was kind of a back end deal to really prevent developers from putting in sidewalks or bike lanes and that kind of thing. So I don't think this is dead, but I think we need to kind of keep our eye on it and make sure we can work with legislators and others to make sure this doesn't happen. ITD is kind of the last backstop for walkers and bikers, and we need to be sure that they have the power to stop things if something is really negative. We also became aware of a bill that made some liability changes at ski resorts for mountain bikers. We informed our partner Swimba, and they were able to work with bill sponsors to make sure that there wasn't anything, a deadly pill in there, so to speak. And then finally, there was our bill, Senate Bill 1276, which would have created a children's walking and biking infrastructure program at ITD. We lost by one vote. We had kind of an unusual circumstance where two of our solid yes votes were unable to be at the meeting, so we lost that vote. But the good takeaway from this is we had a great, I guess you could say, partnership with other organizations, which included included the Idaho Cities, Compass, AARP, and others. There's about 10 different sponsors. So our hope is that we're able to bring, maybe not this bill exactly, but our hope is to build those relationships into future sidewalk and crosswalk funding in the future. So that's kind of the wrap up of the session on the transportation side of things. And I just wanted to maybe open it up if anybody had any specific questions on transportation legislation during the session. And if not, I can zip into the kind of the big picture things of the legislative session.
I have one, Lance. Was there, I guess I have two related to like the robots. I mean, we see inaccessible pedestrian push buttons blocked by contractor equipment. What was there consideration of how those robots would function in those situations?
Don, that's an excellent question. I don't think there was consideration on that, and that's something that we're going to have to, again, kind of monitor and see if any of these are ever deployed, that we need to, watch it closely. And if that's an issue, then we need to bring that to the attention of the legislature and ITD.
And one more, I know in like late January, the ITD director presented to the Senate Transportation Committee, and he made two claims about pedestrian safety that aren't based in any fact. He said that they were due to pedestrians being distracted, for which there's no NHTSA data supporting that. And he said someone in Maryland told him it was opioids. And I looked at 4 years of Maryland's highway safety plan and don't see that mentioned. Did he ever come back to correct the record before those senators?
As Don, again, excellent question. I am unaware that he did, but I know that the issue was brought to his attention, and I don't think I don't believe he's been repeating that since. So I think the message was heard and taken by ITD, I think. But we'll, Cynthia and I plan on meeting with the director during the interim, and we'll bring that question up and just make sure that, he understands the issue.
One additional concern or question I'd have, Lance, regarding the robots is are they going to be able to detect people fairly well and navigate around them? And I'm thinking primarily of people who are blind and navigating our infrastructure quite differently from the rest of us, and wouldn't necessarily know that something like that is coming or near them or passing them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I don't know if that was brought up, but I think that's something we need to be aware of. I think one thing just is the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. As you may remember, last fall we had a fall policy conference, and we had a really interesting presentation from the university, maybe not university, but the Utah Department of Transportation, and on autonomous vehicles. Maybe perhaps we can look into the idea of having a presentation on these, robots from somebody, and maybe we can, further flush out the policy concerns and share that with our policy folks.
Well, Deanna, I think you bring up a good point in some of the pedestrian spacing needs I brought up last week. A 5-foot sidewalk that is ITD's default, and a lot of cities still have 4 foot. That robot can't operate on that and still be ADA compliant coming across anybody using that sidewalk with a mobility device. That just simply can't be done. So that's very easy to display on those things. And where we have mega block links on a lot of these corridors, it's not like it's going to send somebody a quarter mile away on the sidewalk. So yeah, there's some realities there that I don't even think they're thinking about.
Cynthia, Lance, this is Elaine. The National League of Cities Transportation Committee has been looking into this. And so if we're going to have a discussion about it in June at our summer meeting, if I learn anything or have any resources I can bring, I'll be happy to do that.
Thanks, Elaine. Do keep us posted. It is concerning. The robots actually were approved by the legislature a couple sessions ago, and then this year they changed the weights on them. So, it is concerning because it can potentially be a barrier on our sidewalks. So anyway, so I want to keep moving. Lance, do you want to keep?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So I'll just jump into some of the bigger picture things that I saw there. One of the issues that's been maybe plaguing the legislature over the last year or so is what to do with administrative rules. And during the 2019 session, the legislature failed to reauthorize the rules. So everything became, all the rules administrative rules that existed were temporary, and they had to be reapproved. And so in I guess, kind of an unintended consequence, which was a good thing, they were able to eliminate, a bunch of stuff that was obsolete or didn't make any sense. But again, this session, they still were not able to approve the rules. And so once again, everything is temporary. At some point, they're going to need to come to the legislature is going to have to agree on something so our so our rules become, somewhat permanent. The other interesting thing on rules is Governor Little issued a rules moratorium for 2020, where he says, I don't want any more new rules. However, I've been working with the governor's Division of Financial Management, and they said, yeah, that's the case, but if you can make a good argument, if a rule is important and the governor, grants a waiver, then you can move forward. So I think it's, so that's kind of out there on the rules process. And then the other interesting rules piece, this is all inside baseball stuff, but every rule or every agency is going to be on a 5-year kind of rolling calendar of revisiting their rules and making changes. And the announcement of what's going to be on that 5-year rolling moratorium will be in the administrative bulletin in October. So we'll kind of get an idea of where the different agencies fall in the rules category. Another big picture thing, obviously, is the coronavirus. And almost immediately, the Governor Little he told the agencies to do a 1% holdback. And this could, depends on how all this coronavirus stuff works out, but it could even get worse, I think. So that's kind of something else to kind of keep an eye on. I don't know if Elaine can add like what's going on with the cities right now, if they're doing anything similar to what the state government's doing.
Sure, I'll pop in. The city of Boise is looking at probably a $7 million revenue shortfall as a result of the coronavirus. That's early estimates. That may be low, and so we're certainly going to have to do some real work on our budget. I think relatively every city across the state is going to be facing the same kind of revenue shortfall. On the other side of it, of course, Congress just passed the CARES Act, the Stimulus Act. The cities in Idaho won't get any of that money directly. The way that there will be some block grant funds through CDBG and a little bit through some other housing and homeless block grants, childcare ones, but nothing directly to cities otherwise. The state government, however, is guaranteed to get at least $1.25 billion from that act. And we don't yet have guidelines on how that money will be spent or what the criteria will be for using it. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to keep an eye on it and make sure that it goes to things that really will help in coming out of this. I've just gotten an email this morning that Congress and the president are looking at a 4th coronavirus act, and that this one may be focused on infrastructure. The House with Peter DeFazio is poised already with a new reauthorization of the transportation legislation federally that increases the yearly amount from about $300 billion to, or the overall amount from $300 billion to almost double that. No one's yet identified a funding source. I'm beginning to get really worried that we're spending an awful lot of money without any identified revenue behind it, but it does look like there might be an opportunity there if we all band together to influence what goes in that act. DeFazio is very supportive of walking and biking. He's a representative from Oregon. And we also have a great relationship with Senator Crapo, many of us do, and he is the banking committee chair at the moment. As banking committee chair, his committee is in charge of all of the transit part of any transportation legislation that comes forward. So I think there's a real opportunity perhaps to influence this 4th act. but it may happen very quickly. We may have to move very quickly. I don't know yet. Like I said, I barely got an email this morning about it.
Thanks, Elena. And I think that's a great point. Sometimes, legislation or opportunities arise and we need to respond. So, the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance is definitely going to be ready and willing to, let our voice be heard. And if anyone hears of anything that, let us know, and we'll probably try to do, I would imagine if there is an infrastructure package, we'll again call on you to reach out to the Idaho delegation and let them know that these things are important. So then I'll just kind of.
It was interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Say the op-ed that Crapo had in the Idaho Press. It's one of the few times you'll see a congressman write. He didn't call it a subsidy, but he did acknowledge all of the non-gas tax, billions in non-gas tax money that have been put into highway funding. And so it's a good article because we still get excuses from agencies and engineers of, well, the pedestrians and bicyclists, they don't pay, gas taxes for that. No, a third of all federal funding is subsidized that everybody is paying for. And to see Crapo essentially put that in that op-ed, it'd be one to go save your PDF for, to use that to fight back with skeptics when you get that response.
That's a good point, Don. Thank you.
I'll post a link to it in the messages.
Okay. And then I just wanted to kind of just touch real quick on kind of next steps for our legislative agenda. There's going to be some elections coming up real quick here, and there's going to be some big changes, particularly in the Idaho Senate. And there's going to be a new pro tem. And for those who don't know, the pro tem is the kind of the counterpart to the Speaker of the House on the Senate side. And so Senator Hill is retiring, and whoever wins that position is going to have a big influence on chairmanships. And in particular, there's an opening on the Senate Transportation Committee because Senator Brackett, who's been a real champion for the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance, is also retiring. So big shoes to fill there. And then also on the committee, Senator Sheree Buckner-Webb has retired. So there's going to be a new Democrat on the Senate Transportation Committee. And so we've got a lot of new folks and new faces that we're going to have to develop relationships with and let them know the importance of walking and biking, and that, the infrastructure and safety needs that are out there. We're also, during the interim, we're going to be working with ITD. Our plan is to work with Molly McCarty, who's their government affairs rep. That's who we'll work with primarily, but then we'll work with Ken and others. And we plan on, tackling a couple issues that we can all agree on and get something going as far as walking and biking policy. But also we're going to be working with them on the next state transportation bill, which may or may not be in limbo because of the coronavirus. The governor might want to kick that can down the road a year. We don't know. But whatever happens, we want to make sure that there's something in there for walking and biking infrastructure and safety. So that's kind of our number one priority over the interim. It's also to work with our partners that we've developed, over the past couple of years here as well. Particularly the AGC, who's kind of they're the big dog on campus. So they're going to have a huge influence. And if we can, work with them to get something on walking, biking infrastructure and safety, I think that's a good thing. Then finally, there's in preparation for this new transportation bill, the Boise State University has been working on a transportation study that'll serve as kind of the foundation of any funding bill. And that study will include what our infrastructure is, and then the different funding mechanisms that they can use, a kind of a dynamic model that they can use that policymakers can use to try to fund future transportation in Idaho. And what's been nice is that Boise State has reached out to us. Cynthia and I have met with Professor Fry multiple times, and she's a I guess you could say she's a big advocate actually for walking and biking. And there will be I don't know how well it will be, but there will be some walking and biking infrastructure, at least acknowledging that it's there and how much we have. So I think that's a huge improvement over the previous transportation bill, where there was nothing at all that existed for what we have for walking and biking infrastructure in the state. And then finally, we are most likely, and this is up to Cynthia obviously, is we'll try and hold another Idaho Walk Bike Alliance Transportation Policy Conference in the fall to lead us into the session. So with that, I'd just like to throw things up for any questions people have.
I'll just talk for a quick second before a question to let you all know. We are anticipating on doing a 2-day event in late October at the Capitol building. So our goal is to do 1 day of advocacy, so similar to our summit that we do in the springtime. So a day of advocacy and then a day of policy focus. And we're looking at October 28th and 29th. So mark your calendars. It's not completely set, but I have reserved the Lincoln Auditorium for those 2 days. So I hope that many of you can attend and be a part of that.
And Cynthia, if I could pop in here, the Safe Routes to School coordinators from around the state, as well as the ITD TAP coordinators, will also be convening around the conference. We may take one half of one of the days, perhaps during the policy part of it, or we may do a half day before or after. That's yet to be determined, but again, if you're interested in safe routes, keep those days in mind.
Thanks, Elaine. Are there any questions for Lance? That's a ton of information, but I really appreciate the wrap up that he just gave. I thought that was really good. And one thing I've learned about working at the legislature is you just live in this total sea of uncertainty. So that's just where we are. Does anybody want to have a question or a comment to Lance?
Cynthia, Lance, this is Rick Just. In 2015, the legislature passed a law prohibiting the use of eminent domain for the purpose of multiple use recreational trails. I know they've tried to go back on that. Where does that stand? Is that still out there in limbo?
That's actually one bill I forgot to mention during my wrap up. There was a bill, but it was a personal bill, and it got just kind of inside baseball is during the legislative session, legislators can offer what's called a personal bill, and so they can just introduce it, and it's good to go. You don't the chairman of the committee can't say no, I'm not going to introduce it. So it gets automatically introduced. However, what often happens, particularly in the House, is bills that are personal bills that are going to go nowhere get sent to the House Ways and Means Committee, and that's where they go to die. And that's what happened this year. And that bill, maybe Cynthia can help me out here, but let me see if I can find that.
Are you looking for a bill number?
I was looking for a bill number of what
335.
Okay, yeah, there it is. Yep. Yeah, and so that died in committee, and I don't expect that bill to obviously we support it, but it would be really difficult for that to change, but it would be great if it would change. Any other questions out there?
Cool. Thank you, Lance. That was a great wrap up. I appreciate it. And I'm going to move on. But again, if anybody wants to ask a question, just please shout out or put it into the chat box. I see a lot of people chatting. Next up is Deanna Smith, a silver lining that did not come from the coronavirus, but is still a silver lining. You want to talk about the crash course, Deanna? You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm on mute now. Hi, Sarah. Can you put my, go ahead and put my PowerPoint up. So I talked briefly about this last week, and Cynthia asked me to talk a little bit more about it this week. some of you are familiar with this. It's a new project we started this year with funding from the Office of Highway Safety at ITD. And we're really grateful to have this funding. Its focus is on the educational side of trying to improve our crash data. We tend to often focus on the engineering side, and we all know that there's challenges there and things that we need to keep working on improving. But we also know that education is a challenge. And ITD, to their credit, does all kinds of efforts. They have PSAs and other educational things they do constantly to try and make this improvement. But they reached out to us and asked if we might be interested in trying to do it a little more directly with communities. So to that end, we developed this project called what we're calling our crash courses. And the focus really is on all users, because we know that drivers, bikers, and walkers all sometimes have bad behavior, which might be due to not understanding how to be safe. So to that end, we've reached out across the state. Sarah, if you want to go ahead and transfer it, we're basically offering a variety of courses as well as technical assistance and some other programs. And these two sheets that you're seeing, I can send to anyone. I think most of you have my email. But really, we've got one that's focused on safe cycling, and that is built off of the League of American Bicyclists Safe Cycling Courses 101. And we have a number of LCIs in the state. Several of you are on the call, actually. So we're using the League certified instructors around the state to help us launch these in different communities. And a number of communities want to do them. Cynthia is taking the lead on safe walking and a variety of opportunities for looking at that more deeply in your community and helping walkers understand what they can do, as well as communities look a little more deeply at what are the opportunities they're providing. Do they have the right environment to encourage walking? And then the last piece, which is something it's hard to get to, but I'm working closely with Lisa Brady, especially on this. And we also have, AARP has a driver class that they do across the state for anyone, so I've reached out to them. So we have two different classes there that we're bringing to people. I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail on this, so if you want more detail, just reach out to me. But I think what I really wanted to talk about is we're talking about silver linings, and of course we've had to kind of put a pause on actually doing these things. We're working with a number of people, and we were getting ready to start trying to roll it out next month, and that's been put on hold. But what I wanted to encourage all of you is to think about, while this is in people's minds and it's been brought to their attention, that more people are walking and biking and experiencing, some of them probably for the first time, the lack of safety that they experience or feel. Safety is partly a comfort reality. Some of us feel safer in environments that others don't. And that's as important as real safety things or truly identifiable engineering safety things, because if someone doesn't feel safe, they're not going to do it. So they're both equally important. So what we focus on is helping people feel more confident and understanding, what they should be doing, what they legally have the right to do, what their responsibilities are, and also what they should understand about other users. And that's a lot of the emphasis in the driver courses. So what I would encourage all of you to do is, I think now's a great time to be trying to find interest and reach out to folks who you think might be interested. These courses, we can bring them to a community. I find that it works best if we bring them to some kind of group or existing event that's already in play, rather than just to invite people to it in isolation. So be thinking about groups. Anything from youth groups like scout troops, 4-H groups, to senior groups, to bike folks, people who like to get together and walk together, as well as events that are already going on in your city. And to that end, I talked briefly about the Road Rights, which is a piece of this program last week, which is the online game that Sarah runs for us. And I invited Brittany Sigliano to join us today because she told me what I thought was just, for me, a really exciting little story about her experience with that game and how it motivated her to go ride on the street with her daughter. So it felt like a success story for me. So I just wanted to ask her to share her story with everybody. Brittany?
Thanks, Deanna. Yeah, just quickly, having these road rights come through, I have not gotten 100 on very many tests in my life, but I did get 100 on my driver's ed test. So I thought I knew quite a bit. However, these road right cards come through, and I realized there's so much I don't know as a driver who has what rights. And being around Deanna long enough, I started to learn a lot more about biking and started to be more comfortable. And while we're cooped up, we're trying to find creative ways to be outside. We try to do biking fairly regularly, but biking is something we're just not comfortable with. And part of that is our texting and driving issue. With everybody being homebound more, my husband called a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, do you mind bringing me lunch? I'm not quite ready to eat out yet." And so I thought this is a good opportunity for us to get on the bike and practice some of these road biking skills. It's important for me that we not be on the sidewalk as cyclists as often as possible. There are times when, with my 9-year-old, it's just much more comfortable for her to be up there. But I want her to have the skills and the comfort to be on the road. And this was a perfect opportunity for us to be able to do that because there was so little traffic. And as I was explaining to Deanna the other day, I took kind of the snippets of conversations and I said a little prayer and crossed my fingers that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing as a cyclist correctly on the road. And I think Deanna reassured me I probably did it right, but it gave my daughter the confidence to be on the road. Confidence is something that she comes easily by, but we also need her to be smart on the road as well. So now I have to figure out how to transfer that to my husband and make sure that he feels confident with her confidence on the road. So it's a good opportunity for us to start testing our skills and getting more confident, I think, because there are so few cars on the road, and it's a perfect opportunity for us, especially when we had a nice sunny morning like we did today. So thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. So to that end, another opportunity I think that we all have that Cynthia is going to talk a little more about is, as we're talking about this, there's a growing movement around the country. I'm sure some of you have gotten things in various news feeds and emails that people are starting to really want road closures. We don't need them as much for the drivers since there's not a lot of them out there. And we also are starting to realize this, with the social distancing demands, we don't always have space. Some places don't have sidewalks at all. Other places, the sidewalks aren't wide enough. And so Cynthia's going to kind of talk about that a little bit. And I wanted to encourage people to be thinking about that. There's, I think, going to be a group of us who are going to try and pull together at least a local strategy. For us, it's primarily SHD who we have to work with on this, but for those of you who aren't here, to think about contacting your city and requesting this. And maybe it's not every day, maybe it's few afternoons or every Saturday or Sunday, but just different ways to start shifting this idea of how we use our streets. And there are places around the country that do, monthly or other types of road closures just as a way to grow the Streets for People movement. And maybe it's a way to get that started in your community and maybe keep it going after we all go back to something more towards how we used to live. And people want it because they got to do it during this time. So to me, that's a real silver lining and opportunity. Cynthia?
Thanks, Deanna. I appreciate that. Just really quickly, for those of you who don't know where the game is, the road game, it shows up on Idaho Smart Growth Facebook page every Thursday. And then we always try to share it. So watch for it and play it. It's very, very fun, and comment, and a lot of people do. It's a really great way to get engaged. I wanted to just see if Lisa Brady would like to give an update on what her crew is doing with the Treasure Valley Safe Routes to Schools.
Sure, thanks, Cynthia. So Colby's here on the call too, and we have been meeting pretty regularly via our Zoom option here. And one of the silver linings for us actually is that we've had a lot more time to explore the things we never get to see, other programs. And we were talking this morning about different ways to reach out on social media platforms with video. And I think it was Charlie maybe that brought it up. Was that true, Colby? About like 30 seconds of video of, to your point, Brittany, road positioning, or what to do when you're coming off the sidewalk and entering a street, or et cetera. So we're currently working on that small project with some things that might hopefully gather interest. So people would want to take a longer cycling class, which our long ones are like 6 hours long, and nobody ever wants to sign up for one of those, but you learn so much. And we're researching cycling programs across the country just to see what kind of video we can actually do. One of the things that's coming out of that, though, to your point, Brittany, is encouraging parents to go out with their kids, ride your bike to school, take the walk to school. Right now it's easy to do because there's not nearly as much traffic. So I think that's a real silver lining, and hopefully with the right messaging coming from all of us, we can make that happen. So that's what I would say. Anything you had to add, Colby?
The only thing I would add to it is even though there's less drivers out there, the worst drivers are still out there, it seems. And they're driving very fast, and they're not stopping for stop signs and things of that nature. So even in this great time for the streets, in some ways, unfortunately, the worst drivers are in fact still out there driving somehow. So be careful.
Thank you, Safe Routes to School crew. If there's anybody who gets out on the streets a lot on their bicycles, it's this group. And we appreciate all the work you both do. So thank you. I'm going to wrap this up now because we're, I think, a few minutes past 3 o'clock. First question I'd like to ask, though, is if anybody would like to do a presentation on something that you see as a silver lining or anything that you're doing, contact myself or Deanna Smith or Sarah and let us know. We'd like to keep these going. We want to hear what others are doing, thinking, exploring. So let us know about that. I want to share my screen. I'm looking at Sarah. I'm going to try this because I put together a document. Okay, can you all see just a white background with some content on it? It's a pretty unflashy document. There are some webinars that I wanted to tell you about. 2 of them are at the same time, I think, tomorrow, but they both look really good, and it's about what we're talking about, changing our streets, because there's more people out walking or biking, and we'd like to see this continue. So 2 excellent webinars. AARP is also giving a live Q&A tomorrow on the coronavirus. So Rails to Trails tool design, I did not put the link in for that. I think if you Google tool design and then rebalancing streets for people, you should be able to find that webinar. And I can post all this on our Facebook or on our Facebook page. 2 great reads that I've noticed. I'm sure you all have been reading incredible stuff about what's going on in our world right now. I find it all incredibly fascinating. I think that we're at a big change in our world, and I'm trying to pay attention. So those are 2 great reads. One is Grist. If you don't read Grist, I highly recommend getting onto it and subscribing. They write some great articles. And then the final thing is there is a primary next month. It's absentee ballot. So just a reminder to everybody to sign up for that, to get your absentee ballot. So,
Yeah.
yes.
I think it'd be good to just let everybody know that we do intend to do these every week at this time through the end of April. And maybe you could mention a couple of the topics. We don't have them scheduled because you're still working on getting the people, but maybe just share a few of the topics that we plan to cover.
Well, I've been talking to some folks outside of the Boise area. We'd love to get rural Idaho to participate. And so I think next week we're going to hear from some folks over in the Driggs-Victor area. And I'd also hoping to get a local community who's doing a really small grassroots project, basically painting a mural on a wall to beautify a connection point for bikers. So I love those types of grassroots projects. I think those are incredibly important, especially today. So those are kind of the focus areas I'd like to explore. If anybody has other ideas, let us know. It'd be nice to not always have it be about Boise. We don't want to talk about Boise most of the time. And my own personal silver lining, this has been my thing to do. I fortunately sit here when I work, I look out on the street in front of my house. And when I see something fantastic, I run out and I take a picture of it because I'm trying to document what's happening. And this is actually on 8th Street. So it's not on my street, but it's one street over. I'm just getting these pictures. This is a picture Sarah took. This is State Street. 5 lanes. There's no cars on that. I love that picture. Yeah. This is on my street. I don't even know these people. I just ran outside and took their picture. They were just walking down the middle of the street. It was on a Sunday afternoon because there were no cars. That's it. That's all I've got. So create your own silver lining. Take pictures. Let's document this. I'm also talking to DEQ about potentially capturing some long-term air quality data because I think our air is cleaner out there. And I'd love to be able to put something together, that shows that. And so these are all really important things, and we cannot let this go because when we go back to whatever normal becomes and we haven't captured this, it's potentially a missed opportunity. That's all.
Cynthia, someone recently told me that recent reports of air quality coming in are much cleaner. So it's not a myth. It's true.
Good. Well, it feels cleaner. It looks cleaner out there. So thank you all for joining us today. Remember, be kind to one another, be patient, get outside, walk, breathe, smile, connect. It's very important. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.